Have you ever wondered if you could survive if you went back to the Little Ice Age? Let's say you do. You wake up in the middle of the night in a tiny wooden cottage somewhere in northern Europe. The roof leaks, the blankets thin, and your breath fogs the air like a dragon with anemia. It's supposed to be June. Birds should be chirping, but instead the wind sounds like it's personally offended by your existence. You open the crooked door, and there it is. The sky is pale gray and moody. The trees look like they gave up. There's frost on the cabbage patch. Again, this is supposed to be early summer, but the world smells like wet straw and broken promises. You're not imagining it. Summer really did forget to show up. The chickens aren't laying. The cow's udder looks like it's on strike. Even the bees, nature's eternal optimists, are sluggish. And when the bees give up, you know you're in trouble. You live in the early 14th century, a time when nature and superstition sleep in the same bed. People don't have thermometers. They measure weather in dying crops and the tone of the priest's Sunday sermon. This week's tone, apocalyptic. The elders say something's wrong with the heavens. One swears the stars aren't blinking right. Another mutters about a comet from last year. Everyone agrees the seasons are off, but no one knows it's part of something bigger a centuries-long climate shift historians now call the Little Ice Age. You might not survive it, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Also, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I read every single one of those comments. Now find a comfortable place to lie down, turn on a small fan, relax, and let's start our journey tonight. The thing is, you don't know this chill is just the beginning. Right now, the world is entering a cold spiral that's going to last hundreds of years. But to you, it just feels like the oven of life's been turned down a notch. At first, people think it's just a bad year. Then it happens again. And again. In the village square, you overhear people talking about France. It snowed in Bordeaux, says the merchant. Bordeaux, another repeats, like the very word should guarantee good weather. Over in Norway, folks are abandoning farms because the soil won't thaw. Glaciers, normally confined to distant peaks, are starting to move, yes, literally move, creeping down valleys like hungry, slow monsters eating everything in their path. Farms, homes, churches, bye. You remember last spring? The planting was hard, the ground too wet, the harvest was worse. Mold grew where wheat should have. Even the rats looked confused. Maybe it's the end of days, someone whispers in the tavern. But the end doesn't come quickly. It lingers. It plays with you. That's the cruelty of the Little Ice Age. It's not one sharp bite. It's a slow, grinding frost that never quite leaves. What makes it worse? You don't know it's global, that people in China are also facing weird drought flood cycles, that the Andes are icing over more than usual, that Greenland is giving up on its name. All you know is your hands are cold, your soup is thin, and your neighbors are beginning to look at bark like it's a snack. One night you help the local carpenter fix a collapsed roof. The gods are angry, he says, hammering nails with more emotion than skill. You ask why. He pauses. Because we're still alive when we shouldn't be, he says quietly. You laugh a little, but you also sleep with your shoes on that night, just in case you need to run from what you don't know. And here's a strange fact to keep you up just a little longer in parts of Europe. During the coldest decades, people reported rivers freezing so hard that entire horse-drawn wagons could cross them. That may sound fun until you realize that's the river that used to bring food to your town. Now it's just ice. Beautiful, useless. Historians still debate whether the Little Ice Age was one long period of cold or several brutal dips in temperature that spanned centuries. But when your teeth are chattering and your lips are cracked, you don't care about academic nuance. You care about surviving till spring. You try to grow turnips in the window box. You fail. The mold wins again. You feed the fire. It dies too fast. You wrap yourself in 2 cloaks and still feel your bones hum with cold. The old woman across the lane says she remembers warmer times. But she also once told you mushrooms could talk, so you take it with a pinch of ice. Still, something is clearly wrong with the world. The sun doesn't feel the same. The sky looks paler. Some say it's the end of humanity. Some say it's just the beginning of punishment. You go to church more, everyone does. One preacher says the earth is being purified. Another blames sin. A third blames women who wear green dresses. Green dresses go out of fashion for about 20 years after that. You try to remember what warmth felt like, then you stop trying. It's easier to forget, and now the rains are coming, and they won't stop for years. But that's for the next chapter. You wake up to the sound of water, not a gentle brook, not a summer stream. Just water, relentless, sloppy, leaking through your thatched roof like it's trying to move in. You blink at the wooden ceiling and see a steady drip fall into the bowl you placed there 3 days ago. It's full now. Again. It's been raining for days. Weeks, maybe. You've lost count. Time in this kind of weather is a damp blur. The path outside your door is no longer a path. It's a mud pit. You tried to walk to the neighbor's cottage yesterday, sank to your knees, and lost your left shoe somewhere around the cabbage row. That was the second pair this season. And the cabbage is moldy, like everything else. Welcome to 1315, one of the worst years to be alive in Europe. The crops have failed. Again, but this time it's not just frost. It's not just bad luck. This is a full-blown disaster. The rains began in the spring and just never stopped. Fields are flooded. Seeds rot before they can sprout. Grain stores are empty. You hear whispers of towns where people are grinding moss into bread. You'd laugh, but you've already tried it. In the next village over, there's been talk of boiling leather boots. It's not a joke. You look at the half-empty basket of dried peas on the table and do some calculations in your head. There are 5 of you. The basket won't last a week. You'd trade for more, but no one has anything to trade anymore. Coins are useless when no one has food. Your neighbor offered his ox last week for a single loaf of rye bread. No one took the deal. Too expensive. You're starting to understand what famine smells like. It's not just rot and mold. It's silence. It's empty markets. It's the way people avoid eye contact. It's the sound of stomachs grumbling in church pews. By summer's end, your village has run out of options. People begin to die not all at once, but one by one. The weak, the elderly, the unlucky. You start keeping track, then stop because it feels too much like counting the days until your own turn. You try to ration, you try to pray, you try to stay clean, but it's hard when it's always wet. And it's hard to keep hope when the rats seem healthier than your children. A traveling friar passes through town. He says the famine is everywhere. England, France, the Low Countries, Germany, all soaked, all starving. It's not just you. That should bring comfort, but it doesn't. You overhear that in some places, parents have abandoned their children in the woods. Not out of cruelty, just desperation. There's even talk of people digging up old graves for food. You think it's a lie. You hope it's a lie, but you don't ask for details. Historians now call this the Great Famine of 1315 1317, and they believe it killed between 10 and 25% of the population in some regions. That's not a plague statistic. That's from hunger, pure and simple, just a lack of food. You didn't die in battle. You didn't get sick. You just didn't eat. And here's a weird one for you people at the time. Believed that certain types of bread could cause madness if baked in damp weather. So they stopped baking entirely. Which helped? Exactly no one. You try to dry out barley kernels on the hearthstone. They steam and hiss and go black. That was your dinner. You dream of apples. You haven't seen one in months. One day, someone from the southern town arrives with a miracle, a salted herring. The whole village gathers around to smell it, not to eat it, just smell. You've never seen grown adults weep over fish before. Now you have. Another day, the miller, remember the one with the crooked teeth, drops dead in his yard. No one moves his body for 2 days, not because they don't care, but because they physically can't lift him. You begin to understand why so many medieval cathedrals have memento mori carved into them. Remember death. It was never far. Historians still debate whether the famine caused more long-term damage than the Black Death. Because while the plague struck fast, the famine was slow, crueler in its way. It turned neighbors into strangers, and strangers into scavengers. You pass by your friend's home and notice his dog is gone. He had 2. Now he has none. You don't ask. You don't want the answer. You start eating boiled nettles. You tell your children they're soup leaves. They pretend to believe you. At night, you sit by the fire, which is more smoke than flame, and try to remember the taste of butter. You can't. Your sister begins coughing, a dry, persistent sound. You pretend it's nothing. You tell yourself it's the damp air, but you know the damp air doesn't make her ribs poke out like that. Still, you wake up every morning, somehow. The rain keeps coming. The fields stay silent. The livestock grow thin. One day, the village elder announces they'll begin digging a new burial pit. The old one's full. That's the first time in weeks you hear someone laugh, just a bitter cracking sound. Well, at least it's not snowing, someone says. It is, of course, snowing the next morning. And as you watch the flakes land on mud and misery, you realize something else you've stopped expecting rescue. No cavalry, no harvest, just you, the rain, the cold, and the slow realization that tomorrow will probably be worse. You are so hungry now that your dreams have changed. No more floating through fields of flowers or glimpsing your mother's old shawl on a sunny day. Now you dream of bread. Loaves the size of your chest. Crusts so crisp they flake when you press a finger to them. You can smell the heat rising off the imaginary stone oven. You reach for it and wake up with an empty stomach, aching teeth, and the taste of nothing. This is 1316, the second year of the Great Famine. You didn't think things could get worse, and yet you were wrong. Again. It's not just your village now, it's entire regions, entire countries. France is starving, so is England, Ireland, the Holy Roman Empire. Trade has collapsed in places. The grain shipments from the coast never come. Rivers have flooded so badly that entire sections of road have simply vanished. Bridges gone, storage barns waterlogged, and the rats thriving. You hear that monks in Flanders have taken to eating the bindings from old books, hoping the animal glue used in the parchment will provide some sustenance. You don't even know whether to be horrified or impressed, maybe both. You try eating grass, it makes you sick. You try boiling straw, it stays straw. Eventually, you stop trying to invent new foods and just focus on surviving each day. But the days have grown mean. So has everyone else. At first, the famine had brought people together. "We'll get through this," you all said. There were soup pots in the square, shared sacks of oats, long prayers. Now, now you don't even knock before taking from an empty pantry, because if there's something in there, it won't be for sharing. Children disappear. So do the elderly. You hear a story, just a whisper, about a man in the next town who was caught boiling something. Strange. The sheriff didn't ask questions, just walked away and told no one. You want to forget that, but it sticks to your brain like tar. That's the thing about the Great Famine. It erodes the layers of civilization. What starts as quiet hunger becomes desperation, then cruelty, then silence. Entire villages are now ghost towns. Everyone either starved or wandered off. And wandering is dangerous. You might find another village, or you might find men with knives and nothing left to lose. One morning, you take a walk into the woods with 2 others to look for acorns. Not because you like acorns, but because they are not mud. You fill half a sack. One of your companions begins chewing them raw. You tell him to stop, that they need to be leached of the tannins, or they'll make him ill. He shrugs. Chews anyway. He doesn't wake up the next day. You watch your neighbor wrap him in a sheet and slide him into the burial pit. No words, no prayers. At some point, someone starts recording the deaths in charcoal on the wall of the village chapel. Names fade in the smoke. Then someone else scrawls this underneath. God turned his face away. You don't know who wrote it. No one admits to it, but everyone leaves it there. A priest visits from the next town over. He gives a sermon, says the famine is punishment, that mankind has sinned, that this is how the Lord purifies the world. He quotes Revelations, fire, flood, pestilence. You stare at him and wonder how much he's eaten this week. You wonder if he's ever boiled bark, if he's ever watched his younger sister forget how to smile. The rains still fall, not constantly, but enough to keep everything wet. The thatch never dries. Your shoes squelch when you walk. The grain, what little grows, is stunted black at the tips. Diseased. Ergot, someone calls it. Bread poison. It can cause hallucinations, fits, madness. No one wants it, but no one's throwing it away either. Historians still debate whether this ergot infestation helped trigger mass hysteria, religious frenzies, and even witch hunts in later decades. You're not there yet, but you're starting to see how it happens. People get desperate. They see things. They blame each other. It doesn't take much to start a fire when everything's dry except for the weather. Winter comes again, and the frost seems to seep into your bones faster this year. Maybe your body is weaker. Maybe it just doesn't care anymore. You wrap up in whatever you can find, wool, hay, old canvas, and still shiver. You hear that some nobles in Paris are eating well, that they had a feast just last week. Roast goose pears and honey cheese from the mountains. Someone asks if that's true. Does it matter? Someone else answers. You don't want to hate. You really don't. But when your belly has been empty for 14 months, it's hard to love those who live behind stone walls and sleep with furs thicker than your mattress. One cold morning, the frost has painted everything silver. It would be beautiful if not for the smell. There's a cart parked in the square. On it, 6 bodies. Someone's trying to collect them all in one trip to save effort. You recognize 2 of them. You turn away and keep your eyes on your feet as you walk back inside. Later, when you're huddled in the dark and someone asks you what day it is, you lie and say it's Thursday. Because Thursday feels better than Monday. Because lying is easier than remembering. You dream again that night. This time, the bread smiles at you. You wake up laughing. That frightens you more than anything else. You blink awake, not from light. There isn't much of that these days, but from the sound of bells. Faint, mournful ringing through the wet morning air. Church bells usually mean one of three things: mass, fire, or death. Today it's death, again. But this time it's not the famine. It's something worse. A rumor arrived 2 weeks ago on the back of a horse. A strange sickness is moving west. It kills fast. No one knows where it came from. Some say the east. Others say it came with the rats on ships. Either way, it doesn't matter, because now it's here. You see it first in the baker's apprentice. His skin goes gray. His neck balloons. He coughs and bleeds from the gums. They burn his straw mattress after he dies. Then the merchant's wife. Then the priest. Then the children. You don't have a name for it yet, but history will. The Black Death. You're still starving, still wet, still tired, and now people are dying too fast to bury. The pits dug for famine victims are repurposed. New ones are carved beside them. Some towns give up entirely and leave the dead where they fall. You try not to breathe too deeply. You avoid crowds. But it doesn't matter. You all live close, sleep closer, share bowls, benches, church pews. You know it's only a matter of time. Oddly, the famine prepared you for this. Your body's already frail, slow, and numb. But your mind, it's sharp with dread. You've seen hunger, but this is fear on legs. This thing creeps. This thing chokes. This thing takes the ones who are still strong. You wrap a damp cloth around your face. Someone says crushed rose petals help. Another says vinegar-soaked sponges. Someone else swears by sitting between two fires because the plagued cannot cross flames. You try it. It just makes you sweaty and anxious. You whisper apologies to the chickens you sold 3 weeks ago. At least they didn't live to see this. The air in the village turns heavy, like it's carrying secrets. The school is empty. So is the tavern. The laughter that once returned in small bursts after the worst of the famine is gone again. You thought you'd hit bottom last winter. Turns out there's another basement below that. In town squares vivos, the flagellants begin marching bare-chested backs bleeding from whips. They chant. They sing. They beg God to spare the world. You watch them pass in the drizzle. One locks eyes with you. He smiles like he knows something you don't. You avoid him. Historians still debate whether these wandering penitents helped or hurt the plague's spread. Some say their open wounds and mass gatherings only made things worse. Others say they were the only spiritual comfort in a world gone silent. You just remember their songs sounding more like screams. You try to pray, but the words stick in your throat. It feels pointless. After all, this is year 3 of death. The village doctor gives up entirely. He packs a bag and walks into the woods. You never see him again. In your fevered dreams, you imagine the old gods rising from the forests, angry and cold. You imagine the rivers talking to each other, saying, "Let's take back the land." You imagine the world shivering itself apart. The weirdest thing, you start to believe it. One morning, the sky is unusually clear, pale blue, gentle clouds. It feels like the earth is trying to apologize. You take a walk first in months. The mud has dried a little. You hear birds, and then you turn the corner and see a cart full of corpses parked beside the church steps. You sit down slowly, stare at the sky, decide to stop hoping. You're not alone. People begin to act differently. Some get married out of desperation or spite. Others turn to drink. One man, completely naked, dances through the town square, shouting, "I beat death." He collapses 20 minutes later. You're too tired to laugh. What no one knows, not yet, is that the Black Death would kill between 30 and 60% of Europe's population in just a few years. Entire towns would vanish, entire families erased from memory, cats blamed, dogs killed, fires set in panic, and all of it on the heels of a 3-year famine. You don't know if you'll live through it. You don't even know if you want to, but you do what people do best: you endure. You stop counting days. You wash with snowmelt. You eat what you can: mushrooms, snails, crumbs from the rafters. You boil your last pair of leather boots. When they're gone, you chew on strips of canvas, just to feel something. And then slowly, so slowly, you almost don't notice it begins to end. The sickness moves on. The bells ring less often. The air, while still damp, smells less like rot. The rats retreat. The funerals space out. You're still hungry, still cold, but you're alive. Somehow, that night, you sit by the hearth, wrap your arms around your knees, and stare into the dim, flickering flame. It's not much of a fire, but it's still fire. And after 3 years of famine, fear, and funerals that feels like a miracle, you're still not eating well, but by now your stomach has learned to be quiet. It rumbles politely, like an old dog too tired to bark. And for the first time in years, the sky is doing something unusual: nothing. No hail, no endless rain, no surprise snow in May. Just clouds. Still ones, gray of course, but uneventful gray. And somehow, that's a relief. You're in the mid-14th century now. The worst of the Great Famine has passed. The Black Death came and went, though it left a scar so deep it echoes in every empty house, every overgrown garden, every name forgotten by the priest. But life, it's wobbling back to its feet. And now that you're alive, now that you've survived famine and plague, you think maybe you deserve a reward. You're wrong, because winter is coming. Again. You remember when cold used to mean cozy stew on the fire, wool cloaks, stories by candlelight. But now cold is something else, something personal. It finds you, it gets into your joints like a rumor, whispers through the rafters, settles into your clothes, no matter how many layers you pile on. And even the nobles are starting to notice. It's 1400s Europe, and you've made your way into the outer ranks of a noble's estate. Not quite a servant, but not quite free either. You patch shoes, stoke fires, run errands. And that means you overhear things, like how last winter Lord Braxley's wine froze in its goblet before the second course arrived. Or how the Countess of Montfort wears 2 fox fur cloaks indoors and still complains of chill in her bones. There's even gossip about a bishop in Burgundy who slipped on ice inside his cathedral. You used to think the rich were untouchable. Turns out the Little Ice Age doesn't care about wealth. Sure, they've got thicker tapestries and warmer boots, but when the cold wants in, it gets in. Through the stones, through the bones. Still, the difference is obvious. You're sleeping with straw in your shoes. They're sleeping with goose feather mattresses. You drink boiled turnip water. They still get imported wine when the rivers aren't frozen shut. You walk outside one morning and the world looks like a failed painting trees, shivering in ice pond, turned to wrist of birds nowhere. You try to collect wood, but it snaps like dry bones in your hands. Your breath looks like a ghost following you. You pass a field. It's supposed to be wheat. It's snow. Again, you wonder out loud, is this just how the world is now? A nearby farmer shrugs. Maybe it always was and we just noticed. You begin to mark winters not by snowfall, but by how deep the frost gets inside your house. Last year, it reached the pantry, the year before the hearth. This year, your bed. And here's the most humbling part. There's nothing you can do. The weather has become your master. Historians still debate whether this cold spell was global in equal measure. Some regions warmed while others froze. But where you are, the ice is winning. Every field yields less. Every harvest is late. Even animals seem reluctant to reproduce. You've never seen fewer piglets. There's an old man in the village who swears he remembers proper summers. He says the sun used to sting, not sulk, that apples grew fat and red, that rivers flowed like silver ribbons, not cracked glass. You nod politely, but deep down you don't believe him. It sounds like myth. Then one year everything changes, not for the better, just for the stranger. The weather doesn't warm at all, not even in June, and the rich begin to panic. Suddenly, there are new prayers, new saints to invoke for weather. People stop blaming sin and start blaming science, or sorcery, or whatever's closest. One noblewoman says her horses refuse to breed. The cold makes them shy. Another swears the family's dog won't leave the fireplace. You wish you had a fireplace, or a dog. But here's the oddest detail of all: people start having winter weddings. Not because it's romantic, but because it's the only time food is cheap enough. Frozen meat lasts longer. Venison is abundant. Animals are easier to catch when they slip on the ice. And no one minds eating soup for a week straight. At least it's warm. You attend one such wedding. It's indoors. The bride wears 2 dresses. The groom's boots steam near the fire. They exchange vows with chattering teeth. Everyone claps with mittens on. You don't remember their names, just that the stew was thin and the bread was frozen in the middle. Someone lights a candle for spring. You watch it burn and wonder if the flame feels trapped. And yet through all this, life insists on continuing. You watch children chase each other through snowdrifts. One falls and laughs so hard he gets a mouthful of slush. You shake your head, but you smile. A newborn screams in the house next door. A cat gives birth in the barn. Someone finds 3 turnips and throws a feast. It's not much, but it's enough to get through another week, and then another, and another. You used to believe spring was a promise. Now you believe it's a negotiation. You step onto the frozen river slowly, cautiously, like you're meeting an old enemy for tea. It creaks, it groans, but it doesn't break. That's good, because the market is already setting up out there. Yes, on the river. The year is 1608, the place is London, and the River Thames has frozen solid. Not a skim of ice, not a delicate layer you could break with a pebble. We're talking carriages, tents, fires, and beer barrels, all plopped right on top of the ice, like it's just another stretch of land. You blink a few times, it doesn't go away. Welcome to the Frost Fair. There's music shouting the smell of roasted chestnuts. A man with a red scarf is selling pies that are definitely not warm, but at least they're solid. Someone's printing pamphlets from a portable press. Printed on the River Thames, it boasts. You buy one. You'll use it as kindling later. A juggler drops an orange. It rolls across the ice and disappears into a crack. He shrugs and keeps going. You've never seen a happier man in a blizzard. This is what people do during the Little Ice Age, when things get bad, but not end of the world bad. They celebrate it, or at least pretend to. The logic seems to be, if we're going to freeze to death, might as well do it while dancing. And it's oddly beautiful if you ignore the part where all the fish are probably dead under your feet. The frost fairs aren't just parties, they're symptoms. The Thames freezing like this isn't normal. It means winters are getting colder, longer, and more unpredictable. Londoners pretend to enjoy it. But underneath the laughter is worry. The river is a highway. When it freezes, commerce stops. Goods can't get in. Food prices spike. Livelihoods shatter. But for now, no one talks about that. Instead, they sip ale that's more ice than alcohol and skate awkwardly in wool socks. Someone builds a bowling alley out of frozen logs. Another offers fox tosses for 6 pence. Don't ask. You won't like the answer. A small boy offers to guess your future for a halfpenny. You give him a pebble instead. He says you'll live to see another frost fair. You pretend that's good news. Historians still debate whether these fairs were acts of resilience or delusion. Were people celebrating climate chaos or just trying to survive it with flair? You're leaning toward both. Back in your cramped lodging, your boots steam near the fire. Your toes are still numb, but the day left a mark, something close to joy. And that's rare these days. But even joy is slippery, like the ice. Later that week, a cart carrying flowers sinks halfway through the frozen river. The driver drowns. No one mentions it the next day. The fair continues. The music plays. But the spot where it happened stays empty, like the ice remembers. That night in the inn, someone tells a story about cattle freezing upright in the fields of Denmark, their breath caught mid-cloud. Another swears that fish were found frozen mid-swim in the Loire. You want to believe they're exaggerating. But a third man adds, in Venice, the canals froze so thick they played football on them. You stop laughing. This isn't just a bad winter, it's a pattern. And here's the strange part. Some people love it. Artists paint the frost like it's divine. Poets write odes to the silver hush of frozen dawns. Even some nobility claim it's romantic, as if a blanket of snow could make up for frostbite and famine. You, however, are not romantic. You are practical and cold. You collect firewood like it's treasure. You wear your hat to bed. You double your socks even when they freeze solid at night. Your landlord grumbles about the coal shortage, and you nod sympathetically while wearing 2 stolen scarves. You survive, and then the ice melts. Suddenly, the streets are rivers of mud and slush. The frost fair is gone. Its stalls collapsed into gray water, its banners floating like defeated flags. The pamphlet you bought has bled ink into a soggy mess. It's March now. You haven't seen green in 5 months. Someone says it's over, like the cold is a guest who finally packed up and left. But you know better. It never really leaves. That's what the little ice age teaches you. That cold isn't just weather. It's mood, memory, movement. It gets in and it stays. And yet in the mud and melt life continues. You spot the first dandelion. A woman sings while hanging clothes that are still stiff with frost. A toddler splashes in a puddle and doesn't scream. You take it all in and let yourself feel something close to hope. But don't get too comfortable. The sun may be back, but it's not here to stay. It starts with an eclipse. You're standing in the village square, staring at the sky with a dozen others, all holding scraps of smoked glass and squinting like confused chickens. The sun dims just a bit, long enough for someone to mutter omen, long enough for the baker's wife to faint dramatically into a puddle, long enough to make you uneasy. You've seen strange weather, you've survived starvation and danced on a frozen river, but this feels different, not colder, not wetter, just odd. The priest announces that God is watching. The blacksmith insists it's sunspots. The brewer says it's witches. Your neighbor just points at the sky and says, well, that can't be good. The eclipse passes, the clouds return. So does the rain. You shake it off. But a few days later, the snow comes back. It's June, again. And this time, it's not just the weather acting weird. The local apothecary is selling powdered coral as a heat potion. The midwife insists babies born in frost have ice blood and can hear dead relatives in their dreams. You start sleeping with a clove of garlic under your pillow, not because you believe it'll help, but because it smells better than your boots. And then there's old Henrik. He's not the village fool, not exactly, but he talks more to the sky than to people. Lately, he's been painting symbols on trees, circles, spirals, suns with sad faces. When asked why, he says to wake the sun up. You want to laugh. You don't, because deep down something in you wonders if maybe he's right. Historians still debate whether 16th, 17th century people saw the cold as divine punishment or natural consequence. The truth, most folks didn't separate the two. If the harvest failed, it was because the stars were wrong, and the bishop didn't fast enough, and your aunt said something blasphemous last Sunday. Everything was connected, and everything was personal. Science is trying. Galileo has his telescope. Kepler is drawing orbits. A few brave souls are scribbling theories about climate and solar activity. They whisper phrases like solar minimum and sun cycles, but no one's really listening. Not yet. You meanwhile are still trying to keep your firewood dry. You notice something else strange this year. The bees are gone. Entire hives vanished. People panic, not because they understand pollination, but because honey was one of the only sweet things left. You hear someone say the bees followed the sun. You nod like that makes sense. At a fair in a nearby town, a man offers weather cures. He has a box of frozen frogs, a vial of mercury, and a goat that predicts frost by the twitch of its tail. You pay a coin just to watch. The goat doesn't twitch. You still laugh, but less. On your way home, you pass a woman in the woods who wears a cloak made of woven leaves. She says her name is Cloud Speaker and that the weather listens to her dreams. You consider asking for a dream, then decide you'd rather just get out of the woods. Back at the village, the fields are bare again. Not ruined, just empty. Everyone planted late. Some didn't plant at all. The soil was too hard, or too wet, or both somehow. You try to grow onions in clay pots on the windowsill. They rot. You collect mold off the cheesecloth and name it dinner. At night, your breath fogs the glass. You trace suns into the frost with your fingertip. Then the sickness comes. Not the plague, something else. A kind of frost fever, people call it. A cold that settles in the lungs and doesn't leave. The young survive. The old do not. The priest dies. The tailor dies. Old Henrik, the one with the tree paintings, does not. He claims he made a deal with the wind. You're not sure if that's a threat or a poem. Some scientists today believe volcanic eruptions during this period, especially in South America and Iceland, spewed so much ash into the sky that it dimmed the sun for years. Combine that with low solar activity, like the Maunder minimum, and you've got a recipe for years of cold, wet, unpredictable weather. But you don't know that. You just know it keeps snowing when it shouldn't. One morning the sun comes up, but it looks wrong. Duller, smaller. You stare at it with narrowed eyes, wondering if maybe it's sick too. A wandering scholar passes through the village. He carries a brass compass and a thick leather journal. He says he's mapping the sun's behavior. You ask what it's doing. He replies, mostly hiding. You nod. That tracks. That evening, you try something new sitting outside just for a moment. Wrapped in furs, holding a cup of something vaguely hot. You stare at the gray sky and for a moment you don't feel angry, just tired, just patient, like the trees. You realize you've changed. You no longer pray for sunshine. You pray for predictability. Just one season where the weather behaves. Just 1 month without strange omens or freezing rain or goats with predictive buttocks. Just one. And then you hear thunder. You sigh, back inside. It's been weeks since you saw the sun. Not, oh, it's cloudy weeks. Not maybe tomorrow weeks. This is sky soup, a flat, heavy gray that sits on your village like a wet woolen cloak. Every day looks the same. Dim, damp, muffled. It's like the world is holding its breath and forgetting to let it out. Your candles burn more than usual. So does your patience. You're in the mid-1600s now, whether you know it or not. And the world is stuck in what future scholars will call the Maunder Minimum, a 70-year period where sunspot activity essentially vanished. In modern terms, the sun got real moody. In your terms, it feels like daylight has been replaced by a badly lit painting. You stand outside with your hands in your pockets, watching a mist cling to the trees like it's afraid of falling. The air smells like mildew and chimney smoke. Somewhere, a dog coughs. The baker says he woke up and thought it was midnight. It was noon. The priest claims the dim light is a sign of humility, that God is teaching humanity to see without brightness. The blacksmith just says, "Don't trip." You agree with all three. Even the crows seem confused. They perch on roofs, feathers puffed up like tiny scholars staring into the fog like philosophers. You envy them. They look warm. Back in the cottage, your windows are slick with condensation. You carve a small sun in the fogged glass. It disappears in seconds. The harvest, a joke. Potatoes the size of marbles. Carrots that resemble ancient fingers. Apples with more spots than sweetness. You bite into one and regret it immediately. You spend a lot of time waiting now. Waiting for light. Waiting for warmth. Waiting for a season that matches its name. And every so often, when the fog lifts, you look up. You see the sun pale and unimpressive, like a coin left too long in water, and then it's gone again. Here's a weird one for you in Switzerland during this time. People started carving hunger stones into rivers. When the water dropped low enough to expose them, it meant famine was coming. The stones were marked with grim phrases like, "If you see me, weep." You wonder if you should carve one, maybe on the wall of your kitchen, just under the spot where the leak always starts. Historians still debate whether the Maunder Minimum alone caused this extended cooling or simply amplified other factors like volcanic ash or changes in ocean currents. You don't care about the cause anymore. You care about your socks drying before they mildew. You've developed new habits. You listen to the walls. You count the drips from the ceiling. You know which corner of the house warms up first when the fire's lit. You talk to your bread dough like it's a child. It rarely responds, and still life pushes forward. A couple in the next cottage has a baby. You hear the cries through the wall, sharp, defiant, very much alive. It's strange hearing something new, like a crack of color in a black and white painting. You meet the baby a week later. You expect it to look like a frostbitten raisin. It does not. It looks hopeful. You hate how much that matters. Later that night, you wrap yourself in a wool blanket, sit on a stool, and listen to the house breathe. It creaks and sighs like an old ship stuck in ice. You imagine it floating through gray seas, carrying you towards somewhere warm. The next morning, you wake up to frost on your eyelashes. Again, you step outside, and for a moment, just a moment, you think you see the sun smiling. Then it ducks behind the clouds like it forgot something. People in town start joking about it. Maybe the sun moved, someone says. Maybe it's in Spain, says another. Lucky son, mutters a third. You try to laugh. You don't quite make it. Instead, you begin to mark the calendar, not by days, but by candle stubs. You know this is not normal. You know something in the sky has changed. But what can you do? You still need to eat, still need to mend the door, still need to empty the bucket under the drip in the roof. You do what everyone does, you adapt. You build thicker shutters, you line your boots with wool. You learn to cook meals in one pot, to conserve firewood. You sleep in shifts to save blankets. You learn to measure the light not in brightness, but in absence of dark. And one day, without warning, the sky clears, just for an hour, and the sun burns down through the gray like an apology. People stop what they're doing. They stare up, eyes squinting, arms out, mouths open. No one speaks. You step into the light, feel it touch your face, and forget how to move. It doesn't last, the clouds return, but for that hour it was there, and that's enough to keep you going a little longer. Because in the little ice age, hope is rationed like firewood, and today you got one splinter more than yesterday. You don't notice the accusation at first. It's just a whisper behind your back, a sideways glance in the market, a pair of children suddenly pulled away from your passing shadow. Then one morning you step outside and see the mark, a crudely painted symbol on your door. Red, wet, uneven. You freeze. You've seen this before. It means someone thinks you're the reason the wheat won't grow. That's right, you. You who've barely had enough to eat for a decade, who wears the same patched tunic every day, who once cried over a split onion, you've been accused of weather magic. Because when the world gets cold, and the sun refuses to show, and the crops die in silence, people want someone to blame. And during the little ice age, witches make excellent scapegoats. This isn't new. Witch trials have happened for centuries. But now, they've taken on a sharper edge. The climate has gone from inconvenient to hostile, and people are desperate for explanations. The church blames sin. Scientists mutter about celestial mechanics. But your neighbors, they blame the woman who knows how to dry herbs. You move the mark off your door, wiping it away with the hem of your cloak. But it stays on your mind all day. At the tavern that night, you hear that in Germany, a whole town executed 20 women because hail destroyed the rye fields. In Scotland, a girl of 13 was drowned because her family's cow gave sour milk. One man chuckles, can't be coincidence. You say nothing. You remember the way the wind sounded that morning, like it was holding its breath. You're not even sure what you've been accused of. Maybe you walked in the fog too long. Maybe your chimney smoked the wrong way. Maybe your sourdough starter bubbled when someone sneezed. Doesn't matter. The trial isn't about guilt. It's about cold. Because every frost becomes a question: who caused it? Historians still debate the role of climate in Europe's massive surge in witch trials during the 15th and 17th centuries. But many agree that colder weather, famine, and fear all played their parts. In times of warmth, people dance. In times of chill, they burn each other. A week later, the village square is packed. A woman stands on the platform. She's maybe 60, stooped, quiet eyes like smoke. You recognize her, lives alone, talks to her cat, gave you cough syrup once. She's accused of causing the late spring snow. The magistrate holds up a bowl of rotted grain. Proof, he says. The crowd murmurs. Some look away. Some look hungry. The trial lasts an hour. No lawyer, no defense. They tie her hands. The execution is scheduled for the next morning. You can't sleep that night. The wind scratches at the shutters. Your thoughts race. Why her? Why not you? You think of your own herb jars, your habit of talking to the fire when you're alone, the time you guessed the rain before it came. You think of packing a bag, of leaving, but where would you go? In the morning, smoke rises. No one speaks. Later, you pass the spot where it happened. The ground is black. Someone's already set up a bench and is selling soup. You don't know what's in it. You keep walking. There's no safety in sense anymore, no mercy in logic. It's not about who's guilty, it's about who's vulnerable and visible. And still, the skies stay gray. Still, the crops don't grow. Still, the people whisper. You notice that the village baker now only sells loaves in odd numbers to confuse spirits. The priest has forbidden red clothing. The school teacher teaches his students to spit before sunrise for good weather. You used to laugh. Now you just take smaller steps. You begin drying your herbs in secret. You stop singing while cooking. You stop offering advice to neighbors. It's safer not to be noticed, but not being noticed has a cost. You feel it one day when a child scrapes their knee outside your home. You reach down to help. The mother yanks the child away. The child cries, not from pain, but from confusion. You go inside and shut the door slowly, quietly, like you're afraid even the hinges might betray you. Later that year, you hear that in parts of France, entire families were accused together. Parents, children, grandparents vanished overnight. One village executed 12 people in 1 week. The reason: a failed wine harvest. You clutch your own flask and sip it like it's sacred. The irony: you miss the cold. Not the bitter, bone-rattling frost, but the silence. The part where snow blanketed the village and everyone huddled together, complaining, but unified. Now, the cold is inside people's eyes. And here's a strange fact: in some towns, people believed that throwing hot coals into wells would banish winter demons. Others walked backwards around their homes at midnight, tossing salt and prayers in equal measure. You try it once, just to feel like you're doing something. It doesn't work, but you sleep a little better. The sun peeks out one day for half an hour. People cheer. The priest rings the bell. A dog barks at its own shadow. Then the clouds roll back in. The cheer fades. The bell falls silent. You wrap your cloak tighter and keep your head down. And the next time someone asks why the snow came back in June, you do not make eye contact. You wake up sweating. Not from a fever, though. For a split second, you worry it might be, but because the air is wrong, heavy, stale, still. You sit up and blink into the half-light. No frost on the window, no chill in your bones. You check the floor, no puddle. You press your palm to the wall, warm. It's 1816 and something unnatural is happening. Summer has vanished, and in its place is a season made of contradiction. You step outside and the sky looks bruised purple-gray, like twilight got stuck. The wind tastes of ash, not fire, not smoke, ash. Like the world has been burned somewhere else and the wind is just the courier. The others in your village don't even pretend anymore. No one says bad year. No one says late bloom. Everyone says the same thing: the sun is broken. And in a way, they're right. Because what no one here knows is that a year ago, on the other side of the world, a mountain named Tambora exploded. In Indonesia, the biggest volcanic eruption in recorded history. It hurled ash so high into the sky that it wrapped the globe in a grim shawl, dimming sunlight for months. This year will be called the year without a summer, and you, poor thing, are right in the middle of it. It snows in June, again in August. Cattle freeze to death in pastures still standing. Birds drop from the sky mid-flight. Crops try to grow, then shrivel and blacken as if touched by death itself. Rivers churn with ice in July. There is no harvest. There is no rhythm, only gray. Every village is now a riddle. What do you eat when the earth says no? The answers vary. Dandelion greens, boiled shoe leather, cats, rats, bark. In Geneva, you hear of a woman trading her child's shoes for a half bag of oats. In New England, rumors spread of people grinding bones into flour. In Germany, an entire town riots over a rumor that one merchant is hoarding carrots. You don't know who to believe anymore, but you do know this. The markets are empty, and your neighbor's face has thinned to parchment. You once mocked the idea of eating moss. Now you eye the trees and wonder. In your village, people begin talking in hushed tones about the end. Not the season, the world. They say the stars have changed, that the moon feels closer, that God has turned his face away for good. You try to joke once, say the weather's just playing hard to get. No one laughs. You hear whispers of new cults forming tiny groups who walk barefoot through hailstorms singing songs no one remembers teaching them. They wear black. They sleep outside. One of them tells you calmly that the sun died last year and no one noticed. You don't argue. Instead, you look at your hands. They're cracked and raw, stained with sap and soot. You've never worked so hard for so little. You've never felt so ancient at such a young age. Historians today still puzzle over 1816. They know about Tambora, about the sulfur veil in the sky, about how temperatures plummeted worldwide and famine returned with teeth sharper than ever. But you don't know any of that. You just know your bread mold is black, and your potatoes are green, and your neighbor hasn't opened his shutters in 3 weeks. And then one evening you meet a traveler on the road. He's pale, damp British. He carries a manuscript. He says he's a poet. "I've just come from Lake Geneva," he says, teeth chattering. "It's awful." You offer him the last of your broth. He thanks you, stares into the bowl like it's a mystery, and tells you something odd. "There were 5 of us in a house, snowed in, nothing to do. We told ghost stories. One of them, she wrote about a creature, a man made of parts, rejected by the world." You blink. "Like a monster." He nods. "No," he says. "Worse, like us." You never see him again. But history will remember that moment. Because while you starved, while crops died, while birds fell from the sky, a woman named Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. Even nightmares bloom in the dark. That's the thing about the year without a summer. It was terrible, yes. But it also changed people. It made artists bolder, poets darker, farmers wiser. It forced everyone to look up at the sky and admit they didn't know everything after all. You meanwhile make a habit of watching for ash. You keep a jar by the window just in case it falls again. And some nights, when the clouds break for a heartbeat and the stars look like holes punched in the sky, you whisper, "Just one summer, that's all I want, just one." And then the cold wind answers, "Not this year." You find the candle stub in a coat pocket, one you haven't worn since the last harvest failed, and it feels like treasure. You turn it in your hands, the wax softened by body heat, and suddenly you're a king again. A little light goes a long way in this kind of world. It's still 1816 and the cold hasn't left. But you're used to it now, aren't you? Not just the cold on your skin, the cold in your bones, in your routines, in your thoughts. The world has shrunk. Every decision feels like survival. Math, 1 log or 2. Eat the carrot now, or save it and risk mold. But here's the strange thing: in the middle of this murky, ghost-colored season, you start to see beauty. Not sunshine, Not blooming flowers, but a kind of elegant gloom. You start noticing how the fog wraps around trees like silk, how the fire crackles like applause when you get it going, how the snow doesn't just fall, it wanders, swirls, writes invisible letters on the wind. And you're not the only one. Across Europe, artists are picking up brushes, dipping into grays, blues, blacks, capturing the sky's long sigh. Caspar David Friedrich is painting lone trees on frozen plains, ruined abbeys in moonlight. His work doesn't shout, it mourns, it whispers. You stare at one of his sketches in a pamphlet someone left at the inn. You trace your finger along the silhouette of a man standing before a foggy abyss. And something inside you nods. Yes, it says, that's what it feels like. You're not alone. A woman in your village, Anna, the brewer's niece, begins composing songs. Quiet, haunting ones. All minor keys and fading notes. She plays them on a cracked harp, and the notes echo through the square like prayers too shy to reach heaven. A boy, 6, maybe 7, starts sculpting figures out of ash and melted candle wax. Tiny things, wolves, stags, a sleeping moon. You ask where he learned it. He shrugs and says, "The shadows showed me." You don't question it, because during the Little Ice Age, weird becomes normal. Historians sometimes describe this period as a kind of bleak golden age. When beauty didn't disappear, it just changed its costume. It put on a gray cloak, stood quietly in the corner, and waited for someone to notice. You begin to write again, not for anyone else, just to remember. You scratch out memories in charcoal on the backs of old bills and shipping tags. Not grand tales, just fragments. Today the frost looked like feathers. A blackbird landed on the chimney. I dreamed of peaches again. You tuck them into a tin and bury them under the hearth. You tell yourself it's not because you think the world might end. You tell yourself it's just tradition. More artists come to town, traveling with mud-splattered boots and journals full of weather complaints. Some sketch the fields. Others write poetry in bad French. You serve them broth and sit by the fire and listen. One man says he's heading to the mountains to paint God's silence. You tell him to bring a second cloak. You start seeing things differently now. Not better, not brighter, but with more weight. Even music changes. People no longer play to celebrate. They play to survive. A well-struck chord can feel like food, a harmony like heat. Sometimes Anna's harp is the only warm thing in the room. One evening during a particularly grim sleet storm, someone brings out a violin. And for 2 hours, 20 frozen souls sit in a barn holding their breath as strings hum like wind over ice. No one claps at the end. They just sit there, silent, changed. That's how this era shapes you. It doesn't kill your spirit. It just teaches it to shiver more poetically. You hear rumors that some noble families are holding masquerades again, that the French are dancing even if the wine is watered down, that in Vienna a young composer named Schubert has written a song called Winterreise. You can't imagine what it sounds like, but you like the title. Sounds familiar. One night you sit with Anna and the candle stub you found. She asks what you think the sun looks like now. You say, a memory with teeth. She laughs, a real one, the first in weeks. And for one moment, brief flickering, you remember warmth. Not just in your skin, in your chest. You go to sleep that night without checking the sky. Not because it's better, but because you've learned how to carry the gray without dropping it. You start walking farther these days. Not for food. There's still nothing but brittle roots and sad-looking cabbage, or for wood, which is now as rare as kindness. No, you walk because you need to see something different, even if It's just a different kind of gray. On one of these walks, you come across a mural, faded, water-stained, half-covered in ivy. It's been there forever, probably, but somehow you're only seeing it now. It's a painting of Saint Hubert, the patron saint of hunters, kneeling before a stag with a glowing cross between its antlers. The stag is white, the forest is blue, there's snow on the ground, but the saint looks warm. You stare at it longer than you should. It doesn't make you feel better exactly, but it makes you feel something. Reverence, maybe, or longing, or just a quiet ache you can't quite name. That's the strange thing about this era. The longer it stays cold, the more beautiful the sadness becomes. You're in the early 1800s now, and the world is still wrapped in its quiet, icy spell. But the arts, they're blooming like mushrooms in dark places. In Germany, romanticism is rising like steam. Poets are scribbling verses full of ghosts, solitude, longing. Pain is fashionable. Fog is the new sunlight. You get your hands on a copy of Goethe's The Sorrows of Young Werther. It's soggy and missing pages, but you read it anyway. You finish it in one sitting, by the window, wrapped in 3 blankets and your own thoughts. When it ends, you stare into the hearth and say nothing for a very long time. You're not the only one moved by it. Someone paints a copy of the mural you saw, but upside down. The stag kneels before the man. No one knows why. The painter doesn't explain. Anna writes a lullaby for a sun that doesn't rise. She sings it at night. A boy carves a tiny ship and floats it in a barrel of ice water. He names it Hope. You hear that in England. A young woman named Emily Bronte has started scribbling stories where people walk on moors and talk to ghosts like they're old friends. That a man named Turner is painting storms so vivid they make viewers dizzy. You understand, because there's something about living in a world where nothing grows that makes your imagination explode in all directions. You can't go outside without 5 layers and a prayer, so you go inward. Deep, deep inward. You light a candle in the cave of your skull and make myths from shadows. Historians say the Little Ice Age helped shape a century of art, music, and literature defined by longing. Longing for sun, for warmth, for clarity, for love that doesn't end in loss, for summer that doesn't lie. You could have told them that. You feel it every time you dream in color and wake up in fog. One afternoon, the wind lets up. You go to the cliff's edge where the lake should be blue. Today, it's silver, still, cold as regret. You see something in the distance. A man on a rock, arms outstretched. For a second, you think he might jump. Then you realize he's posing. Another painter, another poet, another person trying to turn the cold into meaning. You wonder if you're one of them now. You've written more than you ever thought you would. You've started noticing shapes in the frost faces, birds, forests you've never walked through. You hum sad songs in strange scales. You talk to the fire like it's your sibling. And the weirdest part, you're okay with it. You've stopped waiting for summer. Instead, you've built a house inside the winter, decorated it, named the cracks in the walls, written odes to the sound of frozen branches snapping. You meet a traveler on the road. She's bundled in furs, cheeks red, voice calm. Cold enough for you, she asks. You smile, not yet. She nods approving. The world keeps moving, slow but steady. You hear that someone in Paris has composed a piece of music where the instruments mimic a snowstorm, starting soft and growing until the whole orchestra howls. They say it made people weep. You believe it. You start keeping a journal tucked under your mattress. You only write 1 sentence a day. Things like, Anna's harp string snapped mid-note, sounded like a bird dying. Soup froze before I could finish it. Saw a stranger sketching icicles. He looked happy. You don't write these things because you think someone will read them. You write them because they're true. And in a world where seasons lie and time feels like wet wool, truth is the only fire that stays lit. You've always thought of cold as something that belonged to Europe. Snowy forests, gray cathedrals, shivering peasants, and coal-blackened cities. But now stories are reaching you slowly, across oceans and borders, and you realize something huge. This cold is everywhere. Not just in your village, not just in your time. The Little Ice Age is a global phenomenon, and it's leaving its fingerprints across continents like a ghost that doesn't care about borders. You hear of the Andes Mountains far to the west, where the Inca Empire once ruled, with golden temples and sun worship. Now glaciers are creeping lower, swallowing fields. Farmers are forced to plant higher up the mountains where the air is thin and their lungs burn. In some regions, entire agricultural systems collapse as the cold shortens growing seasons to nearly nothing. Farther north in the American colonies, settlers write in their journals about savage winter's snow that comes before harvest lakes that don't thaw until summer's almost gone. You read a borrowed letter from a man in Massachusetts who claims the ice on his pond sang hymns. You believe him. Even China, ancient and enduring, isn't spared. The Yangtze River freezes something the elders insist they've never seen. Peach trees refuse to bloom. Droughts and floods trade places like drunk dancers. You hear someone say that dynasties fall when rivers change behavior, and you think about how much power lives in the weather. You think about how little power lives in you. In North Africa, merchants complain that the caravan routes are less predictable now. Sandstorms come at odd times. Rains fall in the wrong season or not at all. One trader's journal, written in delicate Arabic script, describes how the stars themselves seem out of sync. In Iceland, volcanoes grumble beneath glaciers. A boy named John writes in a shaky hand that his sheep are dying and the sky hasn't shown its face in weeks. There are whispers that the old gods are coming back, he writes. I hope they are kind. You begin to understand that the Little Ice Age isn't a local story. It's not just yours. It's the planet's shared fever dream. Historians still debate whether every region was affected equally. Some areas grew colder, others drier. Some, like parts of Africa and the Ottoman Empire, experienced prolonged drought instead of snow. But the outcome was the same instability, uncertainty, and the gnawing feeling that the sky had changed its mind. This global reach means something. You're not sure what. But it makes your own suffering feel both smaller and stranger. You picture a child in Kyoto watching cherry blossoms refuse to bloom, just like you watched your rye wither in frost. You picture a woman in Peru chasing llamas through thinning pastures while you chased chickens through snow. Somehow, that makes it easier, not happier, just easier. You start marking a world map on your cottage wall, crudely drawn with notes and charcoal. Andes, glacier surge. China, frozen rivers. Africa, delayed monsoons. England, frost fairs. Germany, witch trials. You, still here, your map becomes cluttered, not just with geography, but with stories. Tiny lives shaped by huge impersonal weather. And yet, there's connection in that. One night by candlelight, Anna reads aloud a passage from a borrowed journal. It's written by a sailor from the Dutch East India Company, describing the icy winds off Cape Horn so cold that they split sails and made the sea hiss. He says he saw a whale frozen in a wave, she says. You shake your head. Sounds fake. She smiles. Sounds beautiful. You pour her another cup of warm cider thinner than usual, but sweet enough to matter, and you both sit in silence, letting the image settle, a whale caught in time, like a god frozen mid-sigh. You start to think of the world not as distant corners, but as one cold breath shared by millions. Different languages, different gods, same frost. And as you lie in bed that night, your map beside you, your fingers smudged with charcoal, you whisper a prayer not to survive, but to remember, to carry the names of all the places this cold has touched, to honor the quiet solidarity of a planet waiting for spring. The air smells different today. Not warm, never that, but different. Less like wet stone, more like something alive. Something moving. You pause at the door, nose tilted like a suspicious cat. And for the first time in what feels like a century, you allow yourself a question you haven't dared to ask in years. Is it ending? You step outside, slowly expecting frostbite or sleet. Instead, there's a breeze gentle, not sharp. The trees aren't exactly green, but they're trying. You squint at the sky and see something unfamiliar, a color close to blue. You blink. Once, twice, still there. It's the early 1800s, and the worst of the Little Ice Age is beginning to thaw. Not all at once, not with fanfare, but in hesitant, slow pulses, like a song that forgot how to play, but is trying again note by note. You're not sure you believe it yet. The firewood stack is still short. Your cloak is still patched. Your boots still hold water like jealous cups. But the mornings don't hurt your lungs anymore, and your fingers move without you begging them to. You talk to Anna. She felt it too. She said she heard birds, not the weird ghosty winter birds, but real ones, singing ones. Then you hear about the river. It's flowing again. The same river that froze solid for entire winters. The same one that hosted markets and puppet shows on its icy back. Now it's melting, cracking, moving, singing to the stones beneath it like a creature remembering how to breathe. You walk down to see it for yourself. Others are there too, not talking, just watching. A small girl throws a stick into the water. It doesn't bounce. It floats. And people, honest to God, people clap. Someone weeps. You don't, but only because your throat is too tight. Historians today mark the end of the Little Ice Age, somewhere in the mid to late 19th century. No clear date, no grand finale. Just a slow return to warmth, accelerated by new technologies, deforestation, and what would later be called industrialization. But you don't know about that yet. All you know is that your windows don't frost overnight anymore, that your knees hurt less, that the candle stubs don't run out quite so fast. You try baking bread again, and for the first time in years, it rises. Not much, but enough to call it a loaf instead of a lump. You name it spring. You eat half in one sitting. You walk through the village and see things you haven't seen in ages. A man shaving outside, a child barefoot, a dog chasing bees. Bees. One old woman says she saw a crocus pushing through the mud near the chapel. It's a trick, mutters a man behind her, but he still checks the next day. You can't blame him. Hope is a dangerous thing, but sometimes it's also a quiet obligation. You begin cleaning the corners of your home, not for hygiene, for something older, symbolic. You hang your coat by the fire, not because it's wet, but because you won't need it tonight. And still you wait, because you've lived through false springs before. Years where May felt like March and July like November. But this feels different. It's not just the weather, it's the people. They're laughing again. Not much, not loud, but real. The market has more than onions and bad memories. The songs played at night are faster, less haunting. Someone uses a tambourine. You hate tambourines, but today you don't mind. One evening you sit with Anna under a tree that is almost but not quite in bloom. She asks you if you remember what the world looked like before the frost came. You think for a long time. No, you say finally, but I remember what it felt like. She nods, and that's enough. The next morning you wake to the sound of rain, not sleet, not hail, but rain, and you don't curse it. You open the door, step into the mist, and feel something familiar on your face. Warmth. You blink again, just to be sure. And this time, it stays. You don't rush outside anymore, not because of fear, not because of cold, but because you no longer need to brace yourself. It's spring again, a real one. You step out into air that's soft, almost shy, as if the world itself is relearning how to be gentle. The wind hums low and kind. The sky is wide and most days now blue, not cloud-smeared gray, not frost-colored white, but true open blue. You stop walking to stare at it so often, people think something's wrong with you. Nothing's wrong. You're just remembering. Not remembering how things used to be. Those memories are blurred anyway, but remembering how it feels to expect tomorrow. The trees around you are unfurling slowly, like they're cautious about believing in the sun again. Buds appear. Leaves whisper. The ground is soft instead of hard, damp instead of frozen. You plant something. Just a few seeds, nothing fancy. You don't trust fancy anymore. But the dirt smells right. The worms have returned. You dig, drop cover, wait. 2 days later, a green shoot breaks the soil. You fall to your knees when you see it, not because it's rare, but because it's real. Across the village, people are opening windows. Dust escapes like ghosts. Children are shouting again, not from cold or hunger, but from joy. Someone repairs a roof just because they can. Anna plays a new tune. It's terrible. You love it. One man builds a bench outside his home, sits there all day. He says he's listening to the warmth return. You believe him. It's been centuries, you realize. Generations born and buried beneath that long, merciless winter. Historians will later debate the causes, map the temperatures, label periods with graphs and technical terms. You lived it. You know it didn't end in fire or revolution. It ended in quiet, one soft morning at a time. The river has forgotten its ice. The frost fairs are just stories, now bizarre ones hard to explain. We used to sell gingerbread on the Thames, someone says, and a boy asks, "What's a Thames?" You laugh. You notice yourself laughing more. Your journal is full now. The final page simply reads, "I saw a butterfly." You walk the old path to the cliff edge again, where you once saw a man paint fog. Today, the lake is awake, light dancing across it, like it has somewhere to be. You sit, not to hide from cold, but just to sit, just to watch the light. You think of the ones who didn't make it. You think of how many fires were lit, how many coats patched, how many shoes passed down. You whisper names you haven't said in years. Some are real, some are yours, and then you stand. Back home, your garden is waiting. It's time to water the sprouts. The soil is dark and full of promise. The air smells of rain, but not fear. The past is still with you, like an old scar visible, but not painful. You made it, and that in itself feels impossible, but true, now. As the final embers of your fire flicker low and the world outside settles into something like peace, you lie back and breathe in the soft dark. The little ice age has ended not with a bang, but with a sigh. Slowly the earth loosened its grip. The frost withdrew. The rivers began to run. The seeds returned to soil that finally listened again. You close your eyes and remember the chill that once lived in your chest, the cracked boots, the sky that never smiled. You remember days when you counted hope by the inch. You remember the silence that followed funerals and the music people played just to feel alive. You remember ice fairs and hunger, whispered curses and candlelight art. You remember the sound of bread rising again. And now the warmth is back, not just in the wind, but in you. So let go of the fire for tonight. Let the pages of this long, cold history curl gently closed. Let the fog roll softly over mountains that no longer want to kill you. Let the ground sleep, not suffer. Let the stars blink kindly instead of coldly. You are not alone. You were never alone. This world turned through every storm, and still you're here watching it wake up. Sleep well, traveler. The winter is over.